Welcome back to the Joseph Graham Show. Today I'm a little bit excited because it's kind of a new adventure. I'm in a podcast group and I had Amanda Johnson reach out to me and I'm like, her story is very interesting because she's the story oracle. So I'm like, you know what? I normally don't just have someone reach out and say, yeah, you can be on my show, but you seem pretty cool. And this is the first time we're getting to actually kind of interact and meet. And I see Grogu in the back, so that makes me more happy. I'm a sci-fi Star Wars nerd. But Amanda, tell us a little about yourself and the name, because I'm into fantasy and stuff like that anyway, like books wise. So the story Oracle, give us a little bit of a rundown of what you do and who you help.
Sure. I am actually the CEO and Oracle at Saved by Story, which is a small hybrid publishing house that helps individuals from inspiration to impact. So I have an idea, I don't know how to get it down on paper. Usually high performing, overachieving, helping professionals who can't find the time, can't organize their, decades of experience into the elixir that it is for the people behind them. So I've been helping people do that for about 20 years. And along the way, I realized that story was just about everything. it was the answer to all of the questions that we had to ask, right? It was why do you care about this message? Well, I've overcome some things. Why do you want to do it right now? Well, I'm ready for the next chapter of my life, right? Like the story was there. And it was actually the reason why people were getting stuck. They weren't able to write because they were running into these old stories. Story is the thing that connects us and attunes us to our reader. And so, anyway, over time, I developed a whole set of what I later learned were called narrative medicine tools and skills and immersive experiences that helped people to move through the story even faster. So Saved by Story, people come to us to do the story work while they're writing and publishing. And then Story Oracle is something that I'm taking to the world. So I am looking forward to taking all of those skills and tools that I've built. I have writing quests and immersive retreats and all of those things that I want to put into other therapeutic spaces because, other individuals need this sort of work. It's wild how it accelerates things. So, I mean, just look at how fast my little guy connected us, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a sense of ease. Story makes such fast, easy connections.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, so I'm probably gonna nerd out here. He says we're all stories in the end, make it a good one. And I
Mhm.
think especially high achievers, people that want to succeed in life. We don't think the same way most people do. A lot of us probably fall into ADHD or dyslexia. I know it's kind of funny. Super high IQ or super high EQ, chip on our shoulders, but we're going 90 miles a minute and we
Yeah.
don't know how to express or get it out. In fact, it's funny you said this because I didn't even think about this. I was playing around today and I did a post and I had ChatGPT tell me a story of who I am from what it knows about me today. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. And I can tweak it. But I was just like, learning to get your message out is key for any business, entrepreneur, person, your brand in general. So let's start there. It sounds like you have tools to begin with to help draw the story out. So the people that are coming to you normally are wanting to like maybe write a book or build a brand. Is that kind of the clientele you work with?
Yeah, most of the individuals are, I've been wanting to write a book since I was little. Like that's a small percentage of the people who arrive. The larger percentage is helping professionals who are looking to for a number of reasons. They're trying to shorten the time that they're in the trenches, right? Like if I can just stop saying these same million things over and over again and hand someone a book, right? That was my first client.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them are really trying to establish authority or credibility in the space because they want to become speakers. And some of them, honestly, I think they just arrive because they need to wrestle with their story.
Mm-hmm.
They have this idea, I'm going to change the world, and then they get in and they start wrestling with the ideas and their belief systems and
Mm-hmm.
the old stories and wounds. And all of a sudden, they're transforming as humans. And sometimes they get to the end and say, you know, that other dream that I came with, I'm not sure. I think I'm going to go back to an old dream because the wound around it has been all mended.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think sometimes we need someone from the outside to look in to help guide us
Mhm.
along the path because see through our rose-colored glasses. Like I always say this, if you don't ever challenge your belief, is it really your belief, or was it
Mhm.
just given to you? And a
Yeah.
lot of those old wounds don't serve us anymore, but there's lessons, and we become the person we are today because of what we went through. So no, I love that.
Mhm.
So how do you help people heal with that? So you said that you walk them through the process and their writing. What type of do you have like different modalities that you use, or how does that look like? Because I've talked with people that help write books. Like, yep, you write the story, ask you questions, and it's just pretty black and white, straightforward. This
Right.
seems like more of a immersive into how they think, why they think, and what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So it's really important to me. My industry is kind of funny. A lot of it is sort of like a boxed system, right? Where here's a book in a box. All you need to do is fill out these things, and we can create that. And I think that those work for a certain type of individual with a certain type of goal for what they're going to achieve. The people who typically find me are people who have succeeded wildly professionally. And yet there's something else going on that they just can't quite crack in their own world. And so they don't really think about that when they arrive. They're just going to talk about their mastery. But something happens when they step into a space where they're not writing technically. A lot of them have written masters and theses. Like this isn't a challenging thing for them. They've done it before. And so, what is it? And for
Hmm.
me, what I realized was so much of it was around the storytelling. So, what I try to do is give individuals the opportunity to be by themselves first. Because how many of us, what did you say, 90 miles per minute, right? It's
Hmm.
like one of the craziest things that happens is, we get into a space together and it's just still. And you just watch all of these people who move so fast, just, they're like so uncomfortable. And I
Yep.
gotta, like, what are we doing? And, and part of that is the breaking of the frame, right? Like stopping the momentum and giving them time to pause and not be so forward thinking like so many of us are, trying to make sure that everyone has what they need, trying to make sure we're off to the next thing in our business. But like, how about we pause where we are right now, take inventory, and maybe even look back.
Hmm.
And so I do use a bunch of modalities. I use story at our retreats. We use story a lot. We watch movies and we talk about them. I use art. There's a few artistic things that we do that are, like stick figures. Yeah, stick figures are great. But the point is that we're accessing different parts of the brain,
Hmm.
because those ones that are really well grooved, the ones that have made us super successful, tend to not be connected as much to the parts that we need in order to tell stories and go back to those scenes in our lives and write them effectively. And, when you're talking about the healing part, one of the things that I realized working with certain individuals, I've studied interpersonal neurobiology, and, I get the benefit of hanging out with them and learning everything while I'm supporting them. And one of the things that I realized very early was this process of writing. There was something that happened when I said, okay, tell me that story from when you were 7.
Hmm.
They tell me the story, and when someone tells you a story, when they narrate it, it's kind of distant. It feels like it's in the past. It's very different than if I say, okay, now be the character in the story
Hmm.
and maybe act it out in front of the room, or perhaps be the character in the story while you're writing and tell me, what did you smell in that room? What were the sounds? What were the, textures that you were experiencing? And really getting them back there. And I discovered that this is actually tapping them into all of these old neural pathways, right?
Hmm.
That were connected to all of these things. And they would be able to access memories, particularly for the individuals who had some really significant trauma.
Hmm.
Something happened that kind of shattered the psyche, and it shatters the memory too. It shatters the timeline. And so you have people, when I say what happened next and what happened next, like in an interview style, like you're saying, I could have that same conversation half a dozen times and get a different timeline. Why?
Hmm.
Because the trauma just broke it all apart. And so we have to find different ways to get at the real timeline. And there's something magical that happens when someone sees it in the proper order.
Yeah.
It's like they see themselves in the proper order. Oh, this and then that. And then everything kind of clicks into place. And there's an integration that happens.
No, I love that. I'm just sitting back thinking of different stuff. So like I'm a little bit of an oddball because I'm definitely falling into the super high achiever, won multiple sales award, entrepreneur, doing all the things I do, but I've always loved to write. It's been like a little outlet. So I've wrote like short stories. I've wrote
Mhm.
like fantasy stories. I've wrote just stuff. But I remember when you said pitching yourself in it, when I was in college and we could write extra stuff in history, I would picture myself like being in the Crusades and writing in first person. And I
Mhm.
find when I write, I always write in first person, which is
Mhm.
weird because most people want to write in third. But
Right.
with me, for some reason, I write in first person. What would be why would I lean more toward that? Or is there like a pattern you see with people that want to write in first person compared to third or
Mhm. So I actually developed a framework because after a few years of watching people dramatically change their lives and stories as a result of writing books, I started to get calls and chats from their friends. I don't really want to write a whole book, but whatever happened for her, can I do that without all that? So
Mhm.
I had to sort of think about the process more than because I felt like it was so customized, but there were these patterns that were happening. So to your question, uh, perspective, character is very first person.
Mhm.
I am right. I'm in the scene. And so some of us really live in character. Like we're really present to what is happening around us all the time. And it feels good to do that. Even when it's hard, it's better than being sort of the narrator, right? And the
Mhm.
narrator perspective is that kind of distant where we want to be in third person. We're talking about the character instead of being the character. I find that a lot of it's the craziest thing, but so many individuals who find me have done so much like personal, professional development, self
Mhm.
development work, and they can give you the map of their story and their trauma. They can even have the timeline right, but they can't connect with me or their audience. Why? Because they're living in narrator.
Mm.
Why? Because my guess is there's some part of them that it just hurts too much to be the character. So I'm
Mhm.
just going to hang out up here in third person and kind of move through my life, be high achiever, and not ever really get the opportunity to live it and feel it. Lots of trauma pops us out into that narrator perspective, dissociative sort of. And so what would happen is I would say, okay, go back to the scene. And they'd say, I hate you. Why'd I hire you? And I'd say, no, really, like, do it. I'm going to sit here with you. I'll breathe. I'll cry
Yep.
with you. It's good. And they go in and then they come up and they'd be like, I survived. Yeah, you survived, like actually living through that. This was just the writing, but writing reconnects us with all of that when we
Mhm.
do it in the first person. We feel it all over again. But the more important thing is that that's what connects the reader to us
Mhm.
when we're telling a story is that they can feel it, that we can tell them that story from that moment in time, because that's usually the mirror moment for them, right? Like
Mhm.
this was the scene, this was the pain. And all of a sudden they go, oh my God, this person really does know how I'm feeling. They really
Mhm.
have been where I'm at. And look at where they are now. Now you have the opportunity to use story to build motivation, to build agency, to build, excitement and to give them a blueprint of here's the heroic journey I took. Here's a few steps that might work for you. So they would do this, character dive and then narrator, because then we had to connect all of the dots. They'd
Yeah.
never done this before, right?
Mhm.
And then at about the 60 to 70% mark, they would have a session with me, or I would get a phone call or a text, and they'd say, you know how in my story, whenever this thing happens, I always do this thing. Like I always say this. I say yes when I should say no, or I leave the room when I probably should stay and fight it out.
Mhm.
And I say, yeah. And they go, do you think this is maybe why this other part of my life just isn't working out? And it keeps interrupting my message goals. It's the thing that interrupts me when I sit down to write my book. It's the thing that interrupts me when I'm trying to launch my course.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that might be it. And what has happened is they've, first of all, they've been immersed in story. Second of all, they've been practicing character. So
Hmm.
they're actually living more in their lives and feeling a little bit more of their lives, but they're also holding that what story am I watching perspective. And when those two things happen at the same time, I say that's the moment where you get to be the co-author because
Hmm.
you're not just the character spinning and turning over what's happening to you or the narrator who kind of knows all the answers but can't move the story forward. That only a character can do that. But you have those two pieces of awareness, and now all of a sudden you have a lot of power in the story. This is what I keep doing wrong every single time.
Hmm.
Okay, new script.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think what happens is we play characters that we're
Mm-hmm.
trained to be or expected to be. So like in my story, like 'cause I've deep dived, and the reason I'm probably more first person now is because I've done a lot of modalities. I've done a lot of the healing work. I've done a lot of the addressing the issues. Why do I respond this way? But I used to be the chameleon. Like whatever group I was in,
Mm-hmm.
I could act like them to the T, to the point where I could change my dialect and stuff, and it was so
Yeah.
natural. It
Mm-hmm.
was crazy. But and that's probably why I'm good at sales. But
Mm-hmm.
now I've gotten to the point where like, no, I'm just going to be who I am. If people like me, great. And if they don't, but it took a really long time of facing the do I love myself? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem because if we look back at all our thoughts, everything that we've gone through, all the decisions, good and bad that we made, and we've all made good and bad decisions because that's
Mm-hmm.
life.
Yeah.
And then do we love ourselves? And I think that's the part where it starts to open up. So I love that you're able to help them see and look back and reflect because I think so many times people don't, especially high achievers. We just keep
Mm-hmm.
running into the same walls because we're not paying attention
Mm-hmm.
that if we just step one step over, there's a door, and we can just open it instead of
Yeah.
hitting the wall.
Well, and one of your points that you just made, I think, is really important. Sometimes our superpowers are so deeply tied to the shadows that we feel like addressing the shadows will make us lose our superpowers. So if I decide to stop, I become really successful because I'm good at, what was your term, chameleoning, right?
Yeah,
Like I'm
yeah,
really
because I'm
good
good at,
at sort of
yep.
shape shifting to meet the
Hmm.
moment. That's a superpower. Maybe you did that because of a trauma that made you have to figure out
100% I did.
how
Yep.
to shift and so it became the superpower that probably brought you a lot of success, a lot of attention, maybe a lot of money. And so now you have someone in your world who says, yeah, and what is it costing you?
Me. If I
Right.
looked at it, if I'm not being authentically true to myself, it's costing me. But now I've gotten to the point where I've done the work enough to know who I am,
Mm-hmm.
so I can still connect and relate and use the
Right.
superpower in the way it needs to be done,
Mm-hmm.
not in the I'm trying to connect so that they don't hurt me. Now I'm connecting because this is going to help benefit moving them down to what they need and let them feel like I can relate and connect with them. So,
Exactly.
but that
Exactly.
took a long time. And
It's
yes,
so much
super
work.
trauma wounds in the back.
Mm-hmm.
I know my story well now. Super things that I've dealt with, gone through multiple times to finally where I got to the point of this is bullshit. I'm done with it. I'm just going to be who I am. And it's
Mm-hmm.
funny on that side of the journey, life is so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy. I'm going to say this right now. It's not easy to face it. You need to face it,
Mm-hmm.
but it is not easy to face your past sometimes. But I think there's just more power when you own who you are and you
Mm-hmm.
realize it. And then, like you said,
Sure.
your superpowers are able to move
Mhm.
forward.
I once had one of my mentors talked about the amount of energy that we expend keeping certain parts of us under wraps.
Hmm.
How much energy do we expend keeping this part of myself out of this scene because I feel she's dangerous, or I feel she'll ruin the moment, or I feel like people won't like me because whatever,
Hmm.
I potty mouth me. She didn't get to show up to the party for many years.
Oh, I have a potty mouth. You can swear as much as you want on my show. It does not bug me at all.
Good.
I even put on every episode explicit because I'm like,
That's
I
funny.
grew up in I'll give you a super short version. I grew up in a very religious
Mhm.
home with a lot of trauma, a lot of just different things. And the church stuff I was going to was so it was just, so I'm probably the antithesis of that at this
Mhm.
point. Like I
Yeah,
believe in God and I'm not against Jesus. I'm just against a bunch of the corrupt bullshit that goes on in a lot of religious circles.
same, same. And actually, that's where my whole journey started with story. I learned all the work in the classic books program around, wrestling with those big stories that kind of shaped civilization. But my real issue was when my son was born, because I had grown up in a similar environment and I was in my early 20s and already feeling the impact, like emotional paralysis, even becoming physical paralysis for me. And I had this kid and I thought, I can't, I, I can't raise him in the same system that created this, but I don't know any other way
Hmm.
to help him figure this out. And so, I used all my child psychology and development and all of the stuff that I'd figured out to help shape a healthier self image, better interactions, less power struggles, more agency, all of those things. Really separating. I don't know about you in your environment, but for me, it was about connecting my worth to my performance.
Hmm.
I was
Yep.
performing, man, I got so much attention. I made a
Yep.
mistake. The end.
Yeah.
Like I'm totally unlovable. And I thought over my dead body while I let him feel like that.
Hmm.
And so I raised him very intentionally for about 3 years. And then one night, of course, even though I told my family, please don't evangelize, just wait until he's like 7 and he asks you the questions. And he came home from one of their houses and said, "Why don't we have a Bible?" And I was like, so mad. And my
Yeah.
husband said, "We do have a Bible. It's Avatar the Last Airbender. That's the Bible right now." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're a genius. I spent 4.5 years learning how to do this, how to wrestle
Hmm.
with these stories and themes." And so most of my story work, um, even personally, like saving parts of my story, has been done on the couch or over books with my son,
Hmm.
because we've been wrestling through these big ideas and my old wounds, and his new parts of his life together. So yeah, it can help rewrite all of that stuff too.
Yeah. Well, and I think so many people need to know it's okay to come from behind the curtain and not have to inherit what was trained in you or ingrained in you. You need
Mm-hmm.
to figure out, is this really going to work for me? I love that your husband did that because he's like, look, figure out what your belief is. Right now, it can be this. It could be Wheel of Time. It could be the Bible. It could be the Quran. I don't care. That doesn't matter. It matters that you're seeking and
Mm-hmm.
finding. And I know I have a lot of friends on here that are Christians. They might not like my view on this, but it's my view. I think God's way bigger than just one book. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think God screwed everyone because he decided to send Jesus when the Romans built the stuff so everyone before them gets screwed. Like that just
Yep.
doesn't compute to me. So I think finding who you are, not letting the beliefs hit you. And then also, I commend you for protecting your family because, again, outside forces, even if they think they're doing right,
They don't.
weren't doing what worked for you and your family,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of one of those having to face that again.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And I mean, I heard it like, train a child up in the way he should go and he will not depart from it. And I thought everyone else who I know who got trained up in this has left the building. Like, I don't know, something about that whole idea isn't working. And what I realized is that it's because, at least in the space that I was raised in, none of it was earned. It was just regurgitated.
Hmm.
It was just, here's the information, here's the belief system, this is it. Do you, let's check for understanding. Okay, great. Now go and try to make that work in the world. Not a whole lot of character development, trying to understand why
Hmm.
these things were in place. And story, the reason why he said that was because he and I were having this seriously spiritual experience watching a Nickelodeon cartoon. Like
Hmm.
we would watch it and then we would have conversations afterwards. And he's like, this is the stuff. Like we could
Hmm.
actually have real conversations with this kid about all of these things in an exploratory way.
Hmm.
And when he turned 17, we had a conversation about time. His teacher told him that she was pretty sure that he would be able to choose immortality, all the everything that's happening in the science space, let's say.
Hmm.
And I said, "Well, would you?" And we love, we play
Hmm.
devil's advocate all the
Yeah,
time
yeah,
with each other.
that's
And
fun.
he said 100% no. 100%. Just
Mm.
no, no even thought about it. And I said, "Why?" And his answer was, every single story we've ever watched about time, what's the message? people who hate it, resent it, try to break it, try to bend it, like they're usually the most miserable characters in the
Mm-hmm.
story.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
people who just accept it's finite, I'm going to make the most of it, I'm going to, savor every moment, like they live good lives of
Mm-hmm.
contribution and meaning. And I was like, can we write a book about this? Because
Yep. Yep.
this
Yep.
was an experiment. Everyone told me he would like turn into this immoral, and he turns out to have a tighter moral compass than most of all the folks who were warning me.
Mhm. Well, because they're projecting again. People
Mhm.
project what they fear to have happen. And in reality, most of them did a bunch of dumb shit and
Mhm.
they feel bad about it. So now they want to put on their kids and have their kids be perfect. And here's the funny thing. So, like in my family, I've taken my kids to church, we've done different stuff, raised them all the same way. And sometimes we go to church, sometimes we don't. Right now, I'm not going. It's just not what I'm wanting to do. But I have a 22-year-old that's very liberal, very into the arts, doesn't really care about church. She's had some really bad experiences. I just support her 100%. My 19-year-old son is the exact opposite. We train the same way.
Yeah.
Figure out what you want to do. Super into church, super into what he's wanting to do, found his group, found what, but it's been his choice. So
Right.
I think it's all coming down to what connects with them,
Mhm.
what makes sense for them, and then also giving them space to question. I love what you said though, because when you said immortality, I almost thought, ugh, because I'm thinking like vampires or other people, everyone's
Right.
miserable. Like
Yep.
everyone I know now, if I get to be immortal, but no one else I love gets to, I
Mhm.
get to watch them all die. That's not cool. And then I
Mhm.
get to watch my great grandkids die, my great great grandkids die, my great 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 that may not even know me. Like, no, that doesn't sound fun. I'd rather
Mhm.
leave a life of impact and be like, great grandpa was crazy, but he did some cool shit. Not
Yep.
great grandpa's still here sitting in the corner, like, we don't know why he's here. Everyone else has been gone for years.
Yep. 100%. And I mean, for him, that was just a pattern recognition.
Hmm.
He just, because he had someone sitting next to him asking questions instead of giving answers.
Hmm.
What do you think of? And often I didn't even have the answer. I would ask him a question and I would truly be interested in his thoughts because I knew that his thoughts were untainted by my trauma.
Hmm.
The friendship stories that we talked about, he was just, he was fine, and I was wrestling with all of my, and so we would talk about that, and then it gave me the opportunity to tell my story. This is why uh all of our friends disappeared when we made a decision to walk away from the church, right? And
Hmm.
so we just had all of these, like, this is
Ooh.
what
Yep.
happens when you
Yep.
hold your ground and you decide to do this, and these are the pros and the cons. And so he just got the opportunity to, as he says it, walk millions of miles in other characters' shoes
Hmm.
before he had to make a decision for himself.
Yeah. You know
And
what's funny? You said that and it clicked. And this is like a pat because we're talking patterns and I like patterns.
Mhm.
And I know we've gotten off of the Oracle book stuff, but we'll get
Mhm.
back there.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just like, I'm going in this vein for a moment. I got kicked out of a church, so no one there talked to me on that one, which is fine. I went to another church, and then when that
Mhm.
church dissolved, all the people that were supposed to be my friends now can't. So I tried a different church, and the same thing. It's like the parents like either do you like me as a person, or only because I'm doing this with you? And I was like, okay, so most people are superficial, and that's why probably most people are walking away from the church and not going because if you don't
Mhm.
go there, oh, I can't be friends with you anymore. Why is that? I didn't change. I just decided not to go to your brand of church. Or, and like you mentioned you as well, you got kicked out. I got kicked out because I told them they couldn't pimp God out. I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. You can't give a certain amount of money to pimp God out. You don't have that power. And for some
Yep.
reason that hurt their feelings. I'm like, how? How can me giving
Mhm.
$20, $1,000, even $1 million get God to do anything? It doesn't make logical sense to me. Like,
Mhm.
sorry, I went on a tangent there,
Yeah.
but like it sounds like that's the same experience that a lot of people are having,
Mhm.
but I think it happened for me. I
Mhm.
actually am more solid in my belief systems and what I want to do and what I want to accomplish and who I am as a person than in that box. Because let me ask you this, in your experience, they tried to put you into a certain box. You could only do certain things, only a certain way. And depending on what brand, you probably couldn't even speak in a church. In certain churches, in other churches, you could speak, but you couldn't do it because of, like, there's so many just stupid
Mhm.
rules that we make up
Mhm.
for no reason.
Mhm. Yeah. And then, as I was studying the classics and looking at all of the ideas that shaped our Western civilization, which is heavily Christian, that was the thing that struck me the most was like, oh, this is superficial. I actually could call myself a Christian if we talked about being back in Jesus's time, because back then they had everything that actually developed character and spiritual formation. All
Hmm.
of the practices, the community time wasn't just time to like go hang out and talk about your relationship with God. It was actually time where you were doing rituals together that tied you to each other,
Hmm.
confession, right? Like
Yeah.
all of these things that were hugely vulnerable, which was the opposite of where I grew up.
Hmm.
And then I thought, okay, I could stay on brand like back in the Jesus days.
Hmm.
I'm not sure uh, when exactly that all changed into what modern society has turned it into now, but
Yeah.
it definitely just feels like one big um, mess.
Yeah. No, yeah. From my perspective, it started out as relationship, turned into religion when it got to Europe, and then when it came to the
Mhm.
US, it became retail.
Yeah.
It's so far from the original source
Mhm.
of what the story was,
Mhm. Yeah.
like compared to what it is now and the requirements now. And I'm just like, I don't, it's not mine.
Mhm.
you can be bound by that. I don't have to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know who, I don't know if you follow him, but he's flipping everything on its head in that space right now is Jordan Peterson.
I love Jordan Peterson.
I
I've
just,
not read all his stuff, but like I'll listen to his stuff and he caught me because I wish I had someone like him talk to me when I was a young man.
yes.
Because I'm 48, so I'm not like old, but I'm older now. Like I'm not
Mhm.
considered a young man anymore. But like I love Jordan Peterson
Mhm.
stuff. I wouldn't say I agree with everything, but 99% of what he says is pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, and I just think, as we're talking about like the process of earning your belief system, really wrestling with the ideas and experimenting, right? As an entrepreneur, like that's what we know. We don't have the right answer up front. You got to get out there and test the waters and figure out if that message is going to land the way that you're thinking it will. And why would it be different in any other part of our lives? And I feel like his approach is like, okay, this is the religious part, but let's talk about psychology and let's talk about neurobiology and let's talk about all this. And all of a sudden it builds so much evidence
Hmm.
around the original idea that I'm like, I mean, where were you when I was 18? This could have saved me like 15 years of a lot of distress.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
But
mhm,
that goes back to like we were talking about finding your story.
mhm,
Why do you respond a certain way? Why do you act a certain way? Why do I get upset if people don't see me? But here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't catch. 99% of the time, their reaction has nothing to do with you. They're not thinking about you at all. They're thinking about themselves and how it's filtering through their vision. And the
yeah,
other person that loves it is thinking about themselves and how it's filtering through their vision. And you could say one thing and piss 50% off and make
mhm,
50% happy. So that's why you have to
yeah,
work on your truth. So how do you help people dial that in? And I know people don't like when I say this, but I just think this way. I think you're accountable to the truth you know, which means what is your
mhm,
truth? And I don't always believe in absolute truth. There's some things like you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't cheat, you shouldn't steal. Like those I'm
mhm,
not arguing, but like
yeah.
experiences how you live your life. How do you help people find themselves?
Actually, I think it's the history work. It's really looking back and being honest. I think that most people, when they look back, they either have those rose-colored glasses because they've arrived, and so they only want to look back and see everything good that led them there, or they look back and they just see one disaster after another. It's very difficult, like that character narrator thing, for people to hold both of those things at once.
Hmm.
And I think that's where the story saving really happens is they're able to say like, oh yes, I was that. I am this. This is what shaped me. This is what was true about it. This is the part. I mean, in my one of my very first cohorts, I was sitting down with this woman who was a former youth pastor, and she'd been burnt. Like she had
Hmm.
walked away. She was done. And she had this. idea for a book to write about everyone else's story. It's like, what about your story though? Because it was like, where's my white picket fence, was the idea. And
Hmm.
I said, well, how is that shaped up in your life? Well, she had this major health crisis. Well, anywhere else? Well, the relationship thing and all of a sudden we find ourselves in chapter 2 or chapter 3, and her sitting in the middle of the room talking about her core belief that she never kind of said out loud before, that God was punishing her
Mm.
with that health crisis.
Ooh, bad doc. Yeah, yeah.
And so me hits all my trauma. So I'm
Hmm.
like taking a
Hmm.
deep breath. There's some other kind of pastoral individuals in the room. And everyone just sort of sat there for a minute. And then I said, you're a mom, right? Yeah. So the worst behavior you can imagine your child ever doing. Can you ever imagine using that term? I'm going to break her so that she'll be obedient. Like, does that work for you with just parental instincts? No. Like, so
Hmm.
you're talking about the most benevolent force in the universe you call Heavenly Father, and you're attributing this. I don't think we're talking about the same character here.
Hmm.
And she had this moment where it was almost an audible snap that you could hear in the room of this belief system that had been keeping her, holding her in pain, keeping her from her purpose. She felt like she was supposed to be a pastor since she was little.
Hmm.
So she wrote the book, got the opportunity to see all of the untruths that she had been holding on to, and recognize the real truth in her sense of, this is the universal, and this is my truth of how this got messed up across my story. She's back in ministry, got her kidney transplant. I mean, like,
Hmm.
everything sort of shifted as a result of her being able to come into alignment reality with
Yeah.
her reality, because she was believing something that wasn't real, and
Hmm.
it was just keeping her in this loop. And then she has this idea, I'm going to go help other people.
Of course, because again, that's part of that
Yes.
ingrained teaching. But here's the crazy thing that you mentioned. She had a belief, and
Mm-hmm.
because it was her belief, even though it was a wrong belief, it was binding her into that persona or character because she thought God was screwing her over. God allows things to happen doesn't mean God's punishing you on
Mm-hmm.
purpose. Anyone that
Mm-hmm.
teaches you that God is punishing you on purpose because you didn't do something right that you had no control over is a moron.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to say it. I have no problem saying that because
I'm in the second it.
it's just so weird to me. I'm looking at, like, I read through the Bible, and yes, there are times where it looks like God is wiping stuff out and doing some really
Mm-hmm.
bad things. If you just take it at face value from reading that, same
Mm-hmm.
thing in the Quran or any of the other books. But then you get New Testament, and all of a sudden God is love and doing all this other stuff. So it's almost like there's two of them.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds funny, and I just made some people just gasp that I said that. But if you look at, I'm looking at it from a story standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Old Testament, God, go wipe them out, kill all of them, kill their children. New Testament, love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
We got two characters here.
Maybe, yeah. And that was the piece with her, was, what do you do when your whole life has been built around that idea,
Oh, that's a
and you've
hard
been
one.
acting that way, and you've
Hmm.
been preaching that way, right? So she had all of these. To admit that truth to herself required such a shift in her personal and professional identity. Um, Realizing the way that this had come out in her parenting, I remember being one of the toughest parts of it. And that is the real path of the work of, okay, if this is the truth in my story, and I do need to wrestle these things out. And that's what she ended up, okay, if it's not true that God broke you, what are some other possibilities? Like, what
Hmm.
what might have been the actual story? And so of course she's in community, right? Safe community that's agreed to sort of hold that space and ask questions and be curious and compassionate. And I said, well, you know, Old Testament, we have a lot of these big issues, plagues, wipeouts, floods, these sorts of things, places just burning to the ground. But what happened before that? Well, God always warned them. God always gave them a chance, and sometimes a lot of chances, and sometimes there were figures who were begging for even more chances
Hmm.
between the time of the judgment and the time of the judgment, right? And so, when we started to have that conversation and put it back into the frame of the story that she knew so well, she was like, "Oh, yeah, actually, I was hearing these things like go check your health, you're moving too fast, there's something happening in your body." Like she was able, because she slowed down and went back into those moments, she
Hmm.
realized that she was hearing God's voice at all of these moments telling her something horrible is coming. Like, do something right
Hmm.
now. And she didn't listen, so it was just a natural consequence of
Hmm.
not listening. It wasn't punishment, right?
Yeah.
And so it was
Yep.
this, okay. And then all of a sudden taking that and looking at what does that mean for her and her story? What does that mean about how she was raised and the work she has to do with mom and dad now? How does this work with uh, the way she's built her relationship with her husband and her children? Like
Hmm.
that core belief affects everything. So, I want to go write a book to change the world. And holy crap, maybe I'm doing this just so I can really sort myself out.
Hmm. That I think what most of the time happens with this type of thing,
Mhm.
because we have this, we see the pain, we see the things through, again through our rose-colored glasses. And when we dig into it, we're like, we have the aha moments and the
Mhm.
change moments, and having the right people around you to support you in those is key. Because if you don't, you get
100%.
burned and thrown down and crushed, and then you have to go find a different tribe to make it
Mhm.
work. But no, I love that she was able to process through that and get to the point where she could get healing so that she could write a book to change the world. She
Mhm.
just, what she thought she was going to write
Mhm.
was not what she was going to write. It was the
I
story
love
she ran
it.
into. And then she was able to become who she's supposed to be.
Mhm.
Like, looking back all the time, I think so many times we want to throw it on God or the person that hurt us or whatever. But in reality, we can only control our outputs, our
Mhm.
inputs, what we do. We can't
Mhm.
control the world outside of us, so we just have to take ownership
Mhm.
of what we can and move forward, which
Mhm.
is not always easy. And I'm not taking or neglecting that people
Mhm.
have gone through some serious shit because they have.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and I think that, to the point of writing the book, some people come in and they think like this is the biggest thing I've ever done in my whole life. And I'm thinking, you just told me that you overcame this, got this award. Like, is this really the biggest thing you've done? And it feels like this giant project, but it's in a short window of time that requires all of this focus. And so it becomes like a hologram
Mm-hmm.
in a way for everything else that's going on, right? They get like this immersive experience if they are in a situation that provides that, and to your point around community that is in agreement about how they're going to operate. Because I heard a story just the other day of a gentleman who, apparently a very successful speaker, sharing his message and story, and he decided to share the story that hadn't been shared before, and it went so badly that his mentor told him, "Don't ever tell that story again. I never want to feel that way again."
Oh.
And now from my perspective, I'm thinking that's the story. The
Mm-hmm.
problem is, like, that's the story that's going to get to his most needed market, the hungriest market, the one
Mm-hmm.
that he will have the most credibility with, be able to make the most impact with. Like, that's the story. But the problem was that no one sat with him and helped him to process it
Mm-hmm.
before he got to the stage. So when he opened his mouth, just all that pain oozed out. And I've seen that go one of two ways: people get up and leave, or they lean in and they try to support. And both situations are not great. They're not great for the career, and they're terrible for that feeling of being an imposter anyways, which is what we're
Mm-hmm.
all running into whenever we're stretching ourselves outside of a comfort zone, just trauma after trauma after trauma. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, do it in a safe environment with safe people.
Yeah. Well, and his mentor probably had the same wound and he hit the wound, and all of a sudden
Right.
he's like, "Oh, don't do that. You're making my fake facade fall apart." Yeah, I
You
am.
made me cry in front of everybody.
Yeah. See, I am always the disruptor. Like, I'd rather be the disruptor, but I
Mhm.
guess that's probably just something I am owning now.
Mhm.
Like, I'd
Mhm.
rather say the thing that they
Same.
don't want to hear to open up the door to give the real people that need help Because if you think you're in a glass colored ceiling and you're good to go and you got all your shit together, you probably don't. And I'm not going to vibe with you anyway. So he just has the wrong mentor. Like that might sound mean, but he just has the wrong mentor. Because the right mentor would be like,
100%.
dude, I'm the same way. Thank you for being willing to share your truth because that was hard.
Hmm.
Now we do need guidance. So this is where I
Hmm.
want you to, we're not done, but I want you to tell people where they can find you because you can help guide them through so that
Sure.
they can process the story, but then when they're delivering it to their audience, actually deliver it to where it connects with them, not makes them crash and burn.
Yeah. Yeah, don't do it at the cost of your own soul. So the website is www.savedbystory.house. And if they hit /foreshadows, there's a whole bunch of free offerings that they can check out too that
Oh,
are
nice. And we'll
how
put
to
that in the show
overcome
notes.
it. Yeah.
No, I love that. I do. Um, okay, I'm shifting only because I'm a big map guy. What is
Mhm.
that map behind you? I keep trying not to look at it. I'm thinking it looks a little bit like the Middle Earth. It looks a little bit
Okay.
like some other ones, like Wheel of Time. So what is the map behind you? Because I can't see the words and I just see like the outline.
So my son and I ended up writing that book. It's titled Raised by Story. And we outlined our journey together. But we outlined it according to the stories that were important to us at these different phases of life. And then we found the themes. It turns out it's very similar to the hero's journey. Surprise, surprise, Campbell was right.
Hmm.
So we have this map that we created, inspiration and uncertainty, all the way to impact through leadership. And so there's these 7 stops that people make. And we have 2 versions of this map. One of them is a version where we have kind of plotted the work that people will do with us at Save by Story so they can see when the portals and when the retreats happen and when everything that needs to happen through publishing and the launch, Faith and Destiny. Like
Hmm.
that's, you're putting it out there in the world. You're like, man, I've done all I can do, and something higher needs to show up and make
Yes.
this work, right? Sword
Yep.
of Gryffindor, where is it? And then eventually, impact through leadership. So then we had to create another map because of our love of story. So sometimes our clients get really, really stuck, and we don't believe in pushing through. We think that story has the answer. And so we created a story map. And so this
Hmm.
has, inspiration and uncertainty has Finding Nemo and The Matrix and Star Trek The Next Generation. And then you move over to safety and camaraderie. And we're talking about maybe Stranger Things and Hunger Games,
Hmm.
right? And then we go up all the way to leadership, and we're looking at stories like Ted Lasso and The Greatest Showman, and these stories that we're talking about all the time as it relates to the archetypes that individuals have to live into in order to be successful in getting their messages out.
I love that. So before I let you go, because we've been going
Mhm.
almost 50 minutes, which I loved, it seemed like it just flipped
Yeah.
by. Um, what are some of your favorite stories? Like you're the story oracle, but what are your
Oh,
favorite? I'm not limiting you. You can say
no, I
five,
know, I
seven. I don't
know.
care. Just
Okay.
whatever pops in your head. What are some of your favorite stories?
So I'm called the Oracle because of the Matrix. She was my favorite character. Who are you? Am I the one? I don't know. Are you? Here's a cookie. If you ask any of my clients how I operate in the world, that's how it goes. Manda, what do you think about this? I don't know. What do you think about that? Here's some dark chocolate. There's the feelings corner. Let's sort this out together. And so The Matrix. And then I think the next one for me was Lord of the Rings. That
I
was the
love
one
Lord
where
of
I
the Rings.
actually it helped me to see myself in characters and be able to say, like, why do I feel like Frodo? And
Hmm.
to this day, my friend who I went through college with and just devoured that story with, still to this day, this is our shorthand. How are you today? I'm in an Aragorn moment. What do you think
Hmm.
that means?
I'm gonna fulfill my purpose moment.
Yeah. And I really don't want to. Like, I
Hmm.
have been running away from this for so long. And this is the moment to like pick up the sword and talk to my ancestors and say, we're doing this.
Yep,
Like,
yep.
right? It's this shorthand for
Mm.
for how we relate to the world. So
I love Lord of the Rings. I love The Matrix too, but like I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan.
me
Like I've
too.
read all the books, I've read all the other different things with it. And when you
How
were
often do
saying
you
that,
watch it?
I got my family into it too, so we
Mhm.
watch it probably once a month.
Nice.
Honestly, I watch the movies. We'll just turn if there's nothing else on, like, oh, well, I can just I have the
Hmm.
extended versions because I had the
Yep.
DVDs when they came out, but I also have HBO, whatever that one is, what they call it. I think they call it Max now, whatever. And it has all of them on there too. So like
Hmm.
always watching it. My kids when they started watching it, they watched Narnia when they were really young, and then
Hmm.
once they got up to where they could handle the fight scenes a little bit more, we
Yeah.
got them into Lord of the Rings. Um, but when you said that, I'm like, I'm always trying to be Aragon
Yes.
like in my head because I'm always trying
Hmm.
to fulfill my quest, but then my quest
Hmm.
feels like it's changed, and yet I need to embrace who I am, yet I'm afraid
Hmm.
to embrace who I am. And it's like one of those crazy hero's journey, like anything. But then
Hmm.
there's other times I feel like I'm Boromir, where I made the wrong choice. I'm really trying to do the right thing, but I
Yep.
effed it up and I tried to take Frodo out instead of taking the orc or the bad thing out of my life. And
Hmm.
yeah, I could go super nerd on
I
Lord of the
love that.
Rings.
We should do a whole other podcast just on Lord of the Rings.
Oh, we can. We will. That would be a fun. Uh, the cool thing about my podcast is it's about building epic lives, and that means everything. Like I had a
Yeah.
space geologist on recently. I don't follow the
Wow.
rules of, and she's like 28 and brilliant. I was like, holy
Hmm.
crap! If when I was 28, I was not remotely this smart. I think she's 28, but I can't remember her exact age. So, Ruby, if you're listening to this, I apologize if you're younger or older than 28. I'm guessing, but like just brilliant minds. And I think this is what it is. I've always been drawn to stories and always been
Hmm.
drawn to certain characters. And
Yeah.
I think it's because when I was younger, I tried to get away from who I was and all the shit I
Hmm.
was going to so I could lose myself in them. But
Yep.
in reality, I found out things happened to
Hmm.
me so I could
Hmm.
become the person I am. Not that I would wish what happened to me on other
Hmm.
people, but since I've already experienced it, now I can use that story to help others.
But what if you had an adult with you who said, "Why do you think you like that character so much?" And then said, "Actually, don't you realize that you have similar superpowers?" Like, there were times that my son just blew me away. Mom, Professor McGonagall is my favorite character. What? Harry Potter should be your favorite. I mean, we would have long arguments about
Hmm.
this. But what I was hearing was I need a magical teacher and I need her to be funny and I need her to understand that I am going to break the rules for the right reason, right?
Hmm.
Like we
Yep.
got to
Yep.
talk about all those things. And so he knows himself.
Hmm.
Um I just it's such a gift. Story is such a gift if we use it mindfully.
Yeah. And I think, yeah. Well, and it's how we did it for thousands of years. It's the
Hmm.
part people don't realize. I always joke with people when I'm talking to them, like, if it was 1,000 years ago, I'd be the old dude by the fire telling stories.
Yep.
That would be who I was. Like,
Yep.
just because I'm just into, like, I literally, when I write, I can picture the story in my
Mhm.
eyes, like in my mind, like I'm there, which is just
Well, I
interesting.
need a handle to wherever you're writing your story so I can check them out.
Okay. Well, it's been a little bit. So I do have a Facebook page. I'll send it to you. The last
Okay.
story, really long story I wrote was on a Viking girl. Her name was
Mhm.
Adine. And during the raids in the 800s in Ireland, she gets taken. It started out with it being a story about a guy and him being the one taking her. But then once I got into it, I got into her eyes because I switched to her person. And
Mhm.
the whole story shifted from
Ooh.
him taking her to her manipulating him in a way because at that time she had to use everything she had at that point to being in charge of the relationship to forging a new life. And yeah, it was kind of a fun little. I probably should go back to that one, but it's been a little bit since I've
Mm.
wrote that because I've been doing more sales and other fun
Yeah.
stuff.
Do you find your experience with your own characters to be similar with your experience with characters on the screen or in books?
Sometimes like I was watching The Last Kingdom, which is a TV
Mhm.
show when I
Mhm.
got into writing about Adine. Um, I don't remember if I was watching, I like space stuff, and I wrote this really weird, super short story called 24 Ships, where pretty much the world blows up and they send out 24 ships, and they have a certain amount of men and female sent to different planets to try and repopulate and save the human race. Like, just, I have weird ideas at times. I know that here we are talking
I
like
love it.
sci-fi and stuff and like but like just weird random
Mhm.
things. I also wrote a story where I was going through a hard time, so I was like the old man in a mountain lamashing the fact that he had lost his love. It
Mm.
just like I don't know, just a bunch of different weird, but always first person. I
Yeah.
tried to write third person, it doesn't work for me. I have to write it in first person. I don't know why that is. It's just how
Mm.
it comes out.
I love it. I can't wait to read some.
Cool. Well, I will shoot that to
Mhm.
you. I have an old blog up, so some of it is easy, but the grammar's not as good. Now grammar's great because I can just use AI. Um, but before I let you go, we've talked about a lot of stuff, and I don't want to end it with just talking about my stories. I mean, they're cool, but we're talking about you today. This is your focus. What else haven't we touched base on, or is there anything else you wanted to leave our listeners with before we let them go?
I think I don't know that it's a what else as much as it's an emphasizing the part about doing any of this with the right people, whether that's a guide, a mentor, a coach, or a whole community full of people who are um, who've been there and done that, or who are in it with you. Um, it's really, really important. It's vitally important. The people who don't do that, I just don't see them succeed as much as the others.
I agree. I agree. No, I love that because community matters and having someone help you guide your voice matters. For me to be super successful in sales, I have had mentors for
Mhm.
years. For me to be a good husband and father, I've had mentors for years. For me, in anything I do, and I'm saying
Mhm.
with you, who you
Yeah.
hang out with does affect the world around you, and who you have guide your story affects the impact around it.
Mhm.
So, Amanda, thank you for being on. And for your
Yeah.
listeners, if you're
Thank you.
curious, go check it out. Reach out to Amanda. I'm sure she has a little system that you can sign
Mhm.
up, go through the process, see if it's good for you. Whether you write the story or you just find yourself, it's something that's important because you live you every day. Don't live a shadow character of who you're not or what someone else put on you. Be the person you're supposed to be. Step in your hero's journey. And until next time, let us know how we can help you and where you're at.